I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And we're from the Spy Hards Movie Podcast.
That's right. And you are listening to Pods Like Us, the podcast that has a license to thrill.
Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I am speaking with returning guest Antony Rotunno. Hey Antony, thanks for chatting with me today.
Oh, thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, I've done the hat trick now.
You have?
Yes. All three podcasts. Yeah.
I need to be on all three of yours then at some point.
Yeah, no one's done that yet either. Yeah, we'll get there.
If anybody... Yeah. No one's done that yet, right? Ooh, we'll get there. So, for anybody interested, Antony has appeared in season 1 of episode 7 of season 1, when we spoke about the podcast Glass Onion on John Lennon. How's that show going, Antony?
It's going all right. Yeah, it's more or less monthly now. I think when I met you that first time, I was sort of pumping out episodes as quickly as I could to get it established.
Yeah.
Now it's established, it's kind of, the 3 podcasts I have are all sort of even now. They're all basically once a month. It's going all right. I still haven't run out of stuff, so doing it less frequently probably helps with that, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Could you imagine trying to release three different podcasts weekly?
Yeah, no, it's impossible. Yeah.
It is.
So I'm hanging in there, yeah.
And the other one was episode 2 of season 4 when we spoke about life and life only.
Yeah, and very kindly you let me put the audio in the Life and Life Only feed as well. Yeah, that was a long conversation.
Yes.
Life and Life Only is basically, it's a search for truth. And truth is almost a loaded word in our culture now, but yeah, sort of inner truth, self-development, psychology, that kind of thing. And then outer truth is sort of alternative media and how to absorb all the information that's coming at us. But yeah, that was a good one as well.
That's cool. So we are speaking today about the other podcast, which is Film Gold, where you look at films that are, would you call them classic films?
Yeah, well, the blurb I've got for the podcast, if I can find it, deep dive into the hosts and guests' favourite films, many of which we consider among the pinnacles of film achievement. There's been a little bit of compromise, you know. My niece Olivia requested to be on the show, and I couldn't say no. The film we chose there, I probably wouldn't consider among the pinnacles of film achievement, but still all right, you know. But that's it, basically, yeah. Classics, yeah. I mean, I guess we'll get on to this, but my film absorption in about the last 10 years, I've sort of gone backwards. Mm-hmm. I almost don't follow films which are coming out in the moment. I sort of vaguely try and keep my finger on the pulse, but yeah, classics. When I was a kid, I was really into black and white films, and I'm never quite sure, never worked out why that is. There was one reason to do with a friend of mine. His mother had an amazing collection, but yeah, I've always been drawn towards the older ones and what are now the older ones, which is the 80s, which of course when I was a kid, when we were kids, were current films. Yeah. Yeah.
I know. It's strange to think that the 80s is, you know, yeah, all that
classic
far back.
Now.
Yeah.
But what's nice is that my sisters have got 5 kids between them, and they're actually all grown up. And my niece is 25 this year, which is insane. That's crazy.
Yeah,
I remember her when she was about 5. It's funny that we start to introduce them to the stuff we grew up with. So Ferris Bueller's Day Off or something like that. My niece and a couple of my nephews, they did genuinely like them. Yeah, but it was quite. My niece and 2 of my nephews are mixed race, and I haven't had the heart to show them Soul Man. Do you remember that film from the 80s?
Yes.
I think they'd take it with a sense of humour, to be honest, but that would be a bit strange. Yeah,
we watched that not long ago, actually.
Or did you? I mean, I think it's a good film, and I think I don't know if it's even. I don't know what it's saying about race. I suppose it's like White Men Can't Jump. It's sort of trying to take a comedic route, you know. But anyway, yeah. But it's fun. It's fun to show the next generation all those classics and see what they think of them. But we watched Police Academy, and none of us were impressed by it.
Oh, right.
Didn't age particularly well, but other ones have. I think it's some real classics in that era.
Even the first one, that's not aged well either, because that was a classic back then.
Yeah, I don't, when I say age well, I don't mean like in terms of PC-ness and wokeness. Just in terms of that's the magic. One of the magic of films is that the film has stayed the same, unless it gets sort of cleaned up or whatever. When you go back to it, you've had X amount of experiences, and you go back 10 years later, and some of them. Like I watched Rain Man, and I thought it was all right, but it hadn't. Because when I was into that film, I was probably about 12 or 13. And I don't think it's obviously not a kids' film, but it's very interesting to go back and see how the film has aged. Again, in the sense of just has it got staying power or not? So yeah.
But for anybody interested, coming up probably around the period when this episode comes out, we've discussed the classic Rocky.
We kind of did the series, didn't we? But mostly focused on the first one. Yeah, that will probably be out in August. So that may not have come out, but we did convene a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? That was good stuff. Yeah, enjoyed
this
that.
Will definitely be out after that episode's out then.
Oh, really? After August?
Yes.
Oh, right.
We're into September now with these episodes.
Oh,
recording in July for September.
Stockpiling.
Yeah.
It's got to be done.
It's got to be. Yeah. That's how you get breaks.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So, what is your earliest memory of film?
Right, earliest memory, yes. Well, obviously there's kids' films.
Yeah.
Probably the two I would remember the most would be The Wizard of Oz and The Sound of Music. And I haven't gone back to those at all, really, for years.
Okay.
I mean, they pop up, clips from them pop up every now and again in different places, but those would probably be the two. And really, but then the big one really was Jaws.
Yeah.
Because if I can get nostalgic for a second, in the 80s, before we had a video recorder, and kids now wouldn't even be able to process this, but I used to get the Radio Times, and you'll know in England, in those days there was the TV Times as well. So Radio Times was BBC, TV Times was ITV.
Yeah.
And you'd have to wait a year or two for your favourite film to come on TV. So I used to get the TV listings every week, just seeing if one of my favourites came on. And then every couple of years, suddenly, without any warning, I'd see, Jaws is going to be on. And I was just sort of just drawn to that film. But what's really funny, I don't know when was the last time you saw it, but the idea of it actually being really scary is quite strange to me now.
Yep.
I think it's still got the jump scares are really effective, but it's a strange film because it's sort of kind of a horror, kind of an action adventure, kind of a buddy film. You can never quite get back that anticipation when you have to wait for things that long and they just come up by accident. You know, it's so different now. It really is. So I feel bad, I suppose, that my niece and my nephews have never quite experienced that. Well, maybe they will, different ways, but I can't. You can never quite get back that sense of anticipation. So Jaws used to come on, and we always knew the story quite well, but we'd only seen it once every, whatever it is, 2 or 3 years. So those have been my earliest, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to somebody recently on a show about, the amount of time we had to wait for Star Wars, for instance, to be released on video. That didn't get released on video until the 1990s. So
Yeah.
even, and kids wouldn't understand that now because they'll just go, oh, well, we can watch it now on Disney Plus. We'll just go straight there and stream it and watch it, and we've not got that problem. So, like you said, they wouldn't understand that sort of issue where the only time you could watch these films is when they show up on the television.
Yeah. I suppose the thing with Jaws as well is that we got my dad bought us a video recorder. And I can remember actually it was about 10 or 11 and Jaws was due to be on the TV and he probably timed it for that. And I have this very, very sharp memory. He said on that day, he said, oh, would it be strange if you could record films and then watch them as many times as you want? I was like, he didn't have to wait 2 years. And then he just said, oh, look what I've bought. And he bought a video recorder. And it's one of those top loader ones.
Yeah.
You press a button and the thing goes, and then you load the video in, press another button, it goes really, really slowly. So I recorded Jaws and then completely killed it by watching it every day for the next 3 months. And that magic has gone forever because I can watch it now and probably know all the whole script, more or less. So I had that tendency when I was a kid to just kill things with overkill, basically.
Yeah.
It is a shame, but yep.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah, we're going to need a bigger boat. But the making of as well is a great story in itself, isn't it? All those documentaries are online now.
Yeah.
It's the 2-hour one they made in 1995. That's incredible stories. And, Richard Dreyfuss telling his story for the 100th time. He does that story about there were radio mics on the island, weren't they?
Oh, right, yeah.
The shark is not working. The shark is not working. Yeah.
But I was saying to somebody else about Jaws that's what makes the film is the fact that the shark didn't work most of the time. So they had to improvise. And with that, because you don't always see the shark at moments, it creates a tension in the film that wouldn't have been there otherwise, that is always there throughout the film. There's always this sense of foreboding, something in the background that you don't see is there, and something's going to happen eventually. It's the build-up that creates, just from the mistake that the shark didn't work.
Well, he followed the Beatles model, didn't he? Yeah, not to talk about the Beatles or anything, but happy accidents and taking advantage of mistakes. And also the horror, I mean, the biggest horror comes from the primal thing, the hidden thing, the thing that you can't see. So in The Shining, when he's on the tricycle, he's going round a corner. You don't have any idea what's around that corner. So I think, I'm sure we'll get to this later, but to do with, I think nowadays with modern films, there just seems to be this need in our culture to show us everything, like completely kill that mystery,
Yeah,
but,
the amount of times I've seen trailers and I think I don't need to see the film now because that trailer's told me everything from beginning to end.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? I don't know why we're not trusted anymore. The audience are not trusted to figure stuff out for ourselves. It's weird, isn't it? I think it's to do with films just becoming more and more expensive, and the more money you spend on something, the less risk you want to take. So that's why we get all this formula stuff, because they know that it's a great moneymaker, and you've got to minimize the risk. One way to minimize the risk is to show the viewer everything, because then they don't go away. Well, I would go away dissatisfied, but a lot of people wouldn't go away dissatisfied because at least they've had a resolution. Now, some of those sort of 70s, what's sometimes called Hollywood New Wave, which is probably my favorite era, they would have downbeat endings, like Dirty Harry chucking his badge into the river. We don't know what will happen, don't know why. There's no resolution. So you might come away from the cinema in those days sort of not feeling very happy, God, what was the ending there? I didn't understand that, So I think it's a way of covering themselves financially, I think, is to make really formula films, because then the audience comes in, they know what they're going to get, and they go away more or less satisfied, if that's what they're after.
I think making the audience out to be. I don't know. How can I word this? I think there's a problem where some modern films or a lot of films can give people so much because it's like they don't want the audience to have to think while they're watching the film. So they give you everything there in the film. There's no thought that you can put into it because sometimes I find that films where you have to think afterwards or during the film, I think they're more interesting because then you're sucked in by the film as opposed to the film just being there in the background. I think really.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're on Life and Life Only, this would be a different discussion, probably. Why we not taught critical thinking? Why are we sort of spoon-fed everything? I don't know why, honestly. I mean, I probably would have some theories, but yeah, I don't know. Like I say, I think on a superficial level, it's just safer to make a formula film. You're spending $50 million. I mean, I think going back to Jaws, there's actually a documentary that appeared that was actually made during the making of the film.
Yep.
And Spielberg at one point says, if I thought about this for a second, that someone had entrusted me with $20 million, which in 1975 is an absolute fortune. If I thought about it too much, I'd go mad. So you just, I do know for a fact now through a couple of friends that when a script is actually submitted, it does more or less go through a committee of people who know how to create those tropes.
Yep.
Because I think, if you want to make money with a film, you don't want to take too many risks. You need a few tropes. It's like with it's like this is a weird parallel, but with EastEnders, soap opera.
Yep.
Essentially, the writer comes up with someone comes up with an idea, and then a bunch of hacks sort of lick it into shape because they know how to write dialogue.
Yep.
And they know how to write certain. So rom-com is a good example. You know exactly what the audience. If we take Yesterday, it's one of the things I'm most proud of is my scathing review of Yesterday, which is online. That was just absolutely designed to make money because it's got everything from a little bit from Bridget Jones. Oh, that bit from Notting Hill was good. That bit from Four Weddings and a Funeral. Stick them in a blender and you get this script which has got almost zero originality. We know they've been watching Goodnight Sweetheart, that BBC sitcom.
Yep.
About the idea of someone nicking Beatles songs. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to talk about that now.
I've avoided watching that film.
Now, if you could put my scathing review in the show notes, I'd appreciate it.
Send me a link and I'll link it.
I will.
So you choose the films because you think personally that they are classic films, or are they in a list online of classic films? How are you choosing them?
Well, kind of both, really. Originally, yes. I made a database about 10 years ago.
Yep.
This is really very anarchy of me, but I went through Wikipedia for every year, and I've actually more or less got a database of every film I've ever seen. It's just over 1,500, and I got them onto flickchart.com, which is a website that helps you rank your films. So now I just refer to Flickchart, really. But yes, I want to, with a couple of exceptions, all the ones we've done so far, we did one special on Marlon Brando, it's a bit different, but they're all sort of top tier films. And I don't really, other than sort of the odd scathing review, I don't really like watching films that I don't think I'm going to like. Unless they're just really, really goofy and I'm just in the mood for that. But yeah, I have a list now and it's sort of dominated by certain eras, but yeah, that's how I would choose it. And of course, a huge list in the future. Never going to get there, but.
You missed the chance to do a deep dive on James Caan.
James Caan. Oh, yes. How did he die? I just saw that.
I don't know.
I just saw
not a clue.
Yeah, I just watched The Gambler recently. It's not bad. Yeah. I don't think we've done The Godfather yet. Yeah, it almost feels like there are certain ones where you think like, what are we going to say?
Yeah.
What could you say about The Godfather? So I don't know. I avoided some for that reason. But we are going to get to the granddaddy Citizen Kane at some point.
Yep.
Because Rob Ager, you may have heard of, he's kind of a friend of mine. This guy from Liverpool. He's a sort of legend of film analysis on YouTube. He requested, and I've got to do an Orson Welles film as well. So he requested Kane. So we'll get there at some point. But, slowly.
Yeah, and then of course you've got the film that came out where it's all about the making of that as well. Recently, not a documentary, but a biopic or whatever you call it. Is it?
Yeah, there were two, weren't there? Is it Me and Orson Welles, or is it the one about the writer? There's one called Mank that came out.
Yep,
is
Mank,
that the one?
I think I'm thinking of. Yeah, I think
about Herman Mankiewicz, who was an alcoholic, who was the co-writer of the script. Yeah, I haven't seen that. Yeah, I think Orson Welles is one of those. It's like Muhammad Ali. Like when that Ali film. I mean, Will Smith did a great job, as good as you could possibly get at looking like Ali and acting like Ali.
Yeah.
But then when you're recreating film newsreels and stuff, it's just like, well, you could just watch the original newsreel with Muhammad Ali. And maybe I feel a bit like that about Orson Welles, but I would like to watch that. Yeah. But I don't think anyone could quite catch Orson Welles. Certain people, it's difficult to impersonate. But yeah, the whole making it.
I still have the surprise, the memory of being surprised that Orson Welles appeared in Magnum P.I.
Oh, did he?
Because he was Robin Masters.
Oh, right, I see. Because I first knew him from the Carlsberg ads, but I didn't know it was him. Carlsberg, probably the best lager in the world. But that amazing voice he had. But I didn't know it was him. Yeah.
I think the first thing I saw Orson Welles in would probably be Casino Royale, the late 60s version with Peter Sellers and Woody Allen. And Orson Welles was in that because he was Le Chiffre.
Oh, right. Yeah, because he started popping up kind of a bit like Marlon Brando did towards the end of his career, sort of popping up as a just in a few scenes and almost like a glorified cameo almost. He started to sort of just pop up in things, like he was in Moby Dick. Yeah, he was in Moby Dick briefly. I think he was the pastor at the beginning who makes that speech, gives that sermon. Yeah, he'd just sort of pop up, wouldn't he? But I think he's managed to make 3 or 4 absolute classics that stand the test of time. So, he's a fascinating character, very flawed, but genius.
He was that era's James Earl Jones.
I hadn't made that connection, but yeah, we'll cover one of his, like I said, Kane and.
Well, yeah, and then I mean, if you wanted to, you could look into say The Third Man as well, I suppose, with Orson Welles.
Well, I've already reviewed that actually on another show. I've sort of got a regular gig as a guest on a couple of other film podcasts, and we did that one. Yeah, we were really impressed.
But there's some behind the scenes stuff for that film, isn't there? The Third Man.
Oh, there's all sorts, yeah.
Because there were a lot of arguments between Carol Reed, the director, and Orson Welles himself. Technically, it was a co-direct job, essentially.
Right. Because he only sort of appeared quite late in the day, and they weren't sure whether he was going to appear, and then he wouldn't leave his hotel room. There's all these sort of prima donna kind of stories.
Yeah.
A bit like Brando, actually. He knew how to play the game of maximising the amount of money he was being paid.
Yes. Superman, for instance, with Brando, how much money he made for that.
Yeah, ridiculous. A few million in those days was a lot. Well, still is, but yeah, he was in about 2 scenes, and I think he's even top billed, isn't he? Isn't it Marlon Brando and Christopher Reeve?
Yeah, I think so. But they filmed a lot more with him than showed up, didn't they?
Oh, did they? Right. And he was also supposed to be, if you remember at the end of The Godfather 2, they flash back to the Don's birthday. He was supposed to appear, but he wanted sort of his fee from the first film. Oh, no, actually I wanted more because he did the first film for a very low fee.
Yep.
because it's the only way Paramount would let him be in it. But Godfather 2, he wanted a few million for turning up at the end.
For one scene, yeah, the
Didn't get
party,
it, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. What a
So
character.
all it ended up being was them waiting for him, and then he didn't, and then you didn't see him actually show up.
Yeah, so him and Orson Welles have got these similarities. We did a 2-parter on Marlon Brando with Ghosty, and we were talking about that. We kept coming up with parallels, but they're weirdly worth it. Someone like Orson Welles has got enough magic, but he's almost worth it. I suppose the filmmakers worked out it was just about worth it. Waiting 3 weeks for him to turn up.
It's like all the difficulties that they had with Brando with Apocalypse Now.
Mm.
It works with Brando in there because he's got that. You've sensed that Brando. Well, there is like a almost a mysterious side to the character that's edgy, and he's the sort of actor who could pull that off really well. So essentially, all the troubles that they had getting Brando and filming with him on that were essential to making that character the character that it is.
Well, they did what they did with Jaws. They made the most of things not going right because he was supposed to turn up looking like ex-Special Forces.
Yeah.
So not quite as ripped as Special Forces, but it's supposed to be in shape. He turned up massively overweight and hadn't read the script or the book. So they basically shaved his head and turned him into sort of Buddha figure.
Yeah.
Very clever. Yeah, like what I mean. I think we're actually going to mention Apocalypse Now in a slightly different way later on. But they made the most of it. What a story that is as well. Jeez.
But I mean, it's good. It's in a sense that with Apocalypse Now that it is Coppola that made the film because he's already got that experience with films he's made before, such as The Godfather, where he would change things on a dime. He'd just you'd be there and he'd suddenly say, okay. And he famously had that, that he'd written out where he got the book there and he wrote the notes or whatever to the sides and wrote in it and whatever. So he's got these where he made these alterations on the spot. So he had that ability to be able to do that anyway, which I think a lot of his friends seem to do, with like Spielberg and that. They all seem to be able to have this ability just to, we've got a problem, we'll sort it, this is what we'll do. And then they just did it. So I think they are very special filmmakers for having that ability.
Yeah, and Coppola was a writer as well, wasn't he? He wrote Patton. Got an Oscar for Patton, actually, before he was famous. Yeah, I think what they learn is that you have to keep working it the whole time. Particularly, just to go back to Jaws that final time, they hadn't got the script in shape. And with all these changes, they didn't realise what a nightmare it'd be filming it on the ocean. So they would have dinners with Robert Shaw, Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, Carl Gottlieb. And they'd all talk about the script over dinner, and then Spielberg would stay up till silly o'clock, refining the script, and then wake up early and do another day of sort of hanging around the ocean trying to get a decent shot.
But that I was going to say the constant reworking of the script and the building it as they're going along gives the script a life in a way as well, as opposed to a film that starts. I'm a lover of Hitchcock, who would never go for any of that. He famously would have already know how everything's going to be done before even going to do the film. But this is different. Where, like I said, it'd almost give the film a bit more of a life with them constantly doing the changes, and it sort of eventually forms into what it becomes.
Yeah, because also you're working with what's happening in the moment. So if an actor does a great improv, or something goes wrong and the scene they wanted is not possible. Yeah, it could be because of the weather or anything. Then you change it. Yeah, it's a very good skill. But I think, like I said earlier, when you're dealing with so much so many millions of dollars that the studio has entrusted to you. And the studio, they may not even be filmmakers, they may just be sort of hard-nosed business people.
Yeah.
When they come and visit the set, it must be like, your boss coming to visit you or something. I think the filmmakers know how to play the game of, I don't know, showing a few rushes to the execs so they go away and leave you alone and then let you get on with making the film. Film business is like music as well. It's like it's like a war of art versus commerce the whole time.
Yeah.
So Coppola's such a strange career he's had, because when he was making The Godfather, he was expected to be fired at like any moment. And he went to the toilet, to the men's room once, and he was in a cubicle, and he could hear two of the tech people, the crew, talking about, they're going to get rid of that guy soon, aren't they? He doesn't know what he's doing. He had people all around him talking about how he didn't know what he was doing.
Timmy.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't imagine it, really. You can't imagine that world.
Well, that scene in Jaws where Robert Shaw's telling that story, I mean, that was that made completely up on the spot, or was that something that he discussed with Carl Gottlieb and then they put that into the script? I can't remember, but that story was from Robert Shaw's own past, I believe.
I think it was originally written by, it's either John Milius or Howard Sackler.
Yeah.
I don't know if it went Milius then Sackler or the other way around. John Milius was involved with Apocalypse Now later as well.
Yeah.
Quite a legend. And then Shaw rewrote it, but I don't think he rewrote it entirely. I think the finished product is a mixture of Milius, Sackler, and Shaw. But of course, famously, he did it drunk the first time and made a complete fool of himself, and then he did it sober the next night. But they actually used both. So there are some scenes of that where he's absolutely hammered, but I don't know, hardened drinker like Robert Shaw, you wouldn't be able to tell necessarily. I don't think it was improv, but I think that was actually that was worked quite extensively. A few people had a go at it, but it's probably a lot longer originally. It's just about right now, I think.
But Robert Shaw's got a history with that anyway, because he's also been a writer as well, or he was a writer as well as an actor back in the day as well.
Mm.
So
he's one of my big favourites. Mm.
Yeah, like Man for All Seasons, for instance, Robert Shaw. Yeah,
The Sting, film I'm going to recommend later. So it's slightly lesser known, but he's great. He's great.
And I loved him in From Russia with Love as well. I thought he was a great bad guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was kind of gutted when he died, because I thought he was more impressive than James Bond. Obviously, morally, they had to get rid of him in that film, but yeah. Oh, what a great actor. And there's some great, if anyone is Robert Shaw fan, if you go to YouTube, there's lots of interviews of him with Dick Cavett that have popped up recently.
Right.
And there's him and Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, which is quite funny. Quite a strange combination.
But, I mean, I've heard, and it sort of bugs me in a way, that him and Richard Dreyfuss actually didn't get on with each other very well either, allegedly.
I think that mainly came from Robert Shaw, to be honest, because he was a drinker and he had these demons, and he was very, very competitive, famously.
Yeah,
I think we talked about this last time about table. He was a big table tennis player, and as you know, I was a table tennis player. So my fantasy, one of my fantasies would be to play Rafael Nadal or Novak Djokovic at table tennis, because you'd imagine they'd be amazing, but you never know, because tennis and table tennis are quite different games. But I'd like to have played Robert Shaw at table tennis. But I think, it mainly came from him. There was a bit of jealousy that came out. But then, weirdly, they were planning to do something in the future, sort of vaguely planning. But Robert Shaw only lived another 3 years after Jaws.
Yeah, which is a shame.
Yeah.
Really, that's awful.
And we think also, with hindsight, we think maybe he was doing it as well to get the antagonism going between the two characters. So he may have been doing it partly for the sake of the film as well. You want to think that,
he's going the whole method route then.
Yeah, kind of. Sort of getting out his own demons and helping the film at the same time, I would guess.
Which
Yeah.
worked because, I mean, essentially Quint is supposed to be a bit of a, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say, but he's supposed to be a bit of a pain as a person.
Yeah, cabron is the word in Spanish if you want to cover yourself by using a Spanish expletive. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think, but you're still rooting for the three of them, and you're a bit gutted when Quint dies. Yeah. He's sort of an Ahab figure, wasn't he? And even,
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but Steven Spielberg wrote a complete script for Jaws. And he had a scene of Robert Shaw in the cinema watching Moby Dick and laughing.
Right.
How bad it was. I think they used that for Cape Fear when Max Cady, Robert De Niro's in the cinema laughing at a film. Like laughing really loud and putting everybody off. Yeah. So Robert Shaw, the Quint, is very close to Ahab, really. Proving that, you could take old ideas and make them your own.
But I could talk about Jaws forever. Great film. One of my favourite films of all time.
Already covered it on Film Gold. We did a commentary. Yeah, that was fun.
We did a rewatch at home, me and Louise. So we watched Jaws. For anybody interested in England, the Jaws films are all available for free on Amazon Prime to watch.
Oh, are they? Right.
So we watched the first one, which is classic. Watched the second one, which I don't think is anywhere near as bad as some people make it out to be. I think it's got positives. It's got positives, but it's also got some negatives as well. And one of the big problems he had with the second one is the fact that they couldn't get Richard Dreyfuss back because he was busy making Close Encounters, I think.
Yeah, they managed to get Roy Scheider, didn't they?
Yeah.
But, then you run into serious problems when you get to the third one. Did you watch the third and fourth one?
We watched the third one.
Yeah.
And it was Louise's first time, I think, watching the third one, and then I said, "Oh, we've got the fourth one to watch next week, which I've never seen, and we still haven't watched it, even though it was weeks, like a couple of months ago. We've still not got round to the fourth one because it's like, do we really want to watch something that is renowned for being really bad?"
Well, without giving too much away, his wife Ellen Brody from the first film, thinks that the shark has a vendetta against their family, that the shark is actually the family of this shark sort of have swum from the USA to the Caribbean or wherever they are to kill the rest of her family. And Michael Caine, there's a comedy value in sort of, bloody hell, that's a big shark. He doesn't say that line, but
You're only supposed to blow the bloody shark up.
Yeah. Think of it as a comedy. Yeah, watch it as a comedy and see if it works.
That's not a bad idea.
I should do that.
He actually said that he did that film so he could buy a new house.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Just that, finance a new house.
Which is brilliant.
That must be a weird situation. You can make a really bad film, but it's going to make loads of money. That's a slightly sort of disturbing aspect of it. Yeah.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris from the podcast Real Film Reviewed, and you're listening to Marv on Pods Like Us.
So when you're getting ready to do the episodes, what sort of research do you do? Do you watch the films multiple times, take loads of notes, and then a lot of online, searches and finding out sort of little tidbits? So, what do you do then? Yeah,
pretty much. I used to make a lot of notes, more than I do now. I still make quite a few, but I sort of learned to trust myself a little bit more. Yeah, I will watch the film typically just once, 2 or 3 days before the recording. There are certain films that I really wouldn't even need. I didn't watch Rocky before we talked about it, because I know the film inside out. I just didn't even need to. But generally, yes, watch it with a pen and paper, old-fashioned. And then I used to listen to other podcasts about the film. Again, I probably listened to one. I don't want to start sort of taking out of people's ideas. So if it's a film that I find quite baffling, maybe, or it's quite nice to hear other interpretations of it, then, makings of pop up online, and there's lots of good film analysis channels. And then I suppose Wikipedia and IMDb, just go through the trivia, and then I generally try and have a personal story related to one of the films.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it really. But try not to kill it. Try and leave a bit for when you do the recording. And when we did Rocky recently, quite a lot of stuff came up in the moment, which is always good. You got to leave that sort of space. So
Yeah.
I used to over prepare in the old days, but not anymore.
Yeah, sometimes I think if you do too much beforehand, it can almost sound scripted in a sense where you're just following and going blah, 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 blah. But do you write notes based upon a specific structure that you have for the episodes, or is it more free-flowing, the episode?
I have like little prompts, but yeah, I would have the structure because generally the guest wants to know what the structure is, but it's pretty simple, really. I mean, I normally put a trailer. I put the trailer at the beginning, obviously in audio form, and then we go through the sort of particulars of the film. When it was made. When we did Rocky just recently, we were talking about the other films that were nominated for Best Picture because that was just a crazy, crazy year for good films. Yeah, I go through the actors, and then I sort of go through the plot, not scene by scene, but we said like the early part of the film is this. So something like Jaws, you've got this classic 3-act thing.
Yep.
So I kind of think of it in that sense, 3 acts. So I talk about each one for about 20 minutes, but you're always leaving space for stuff to happen. Because sometimes the review comes out very different than the way you imagined it. But that's generally what I do. And then themes, of course, because I think Film Gold, I have a tendency to analyze and overanalyze everything, really. So films is so perfect for that. So the themes of the film. Also, at the beginning, the guest's history with the film. How many times have they seen it? What were their initial impressions? That kind of thing. But it just tends to flow. So I get someone on who loves the film, and I love it as well. And you could almost do it without notes, but I like to just have a few prompts just in case.
Yeah,
like now.
So that you don't get any dead air.
Yeah, dead air is a crime.
It
Of
is.
course, editing. I don't do many live ones. When I had Rob on, I kind of felt like I wanted to do like a live video with him. We did Night of the Living Dead, but generally it's audio, and I feel happy that I can record and just sort of not worry about it because I can take care of bits later on. So yeah, we've been doing it a while, haven't we?
So that nicely leads into the next one then, which is the recording and editing of the show.
Well, still the same as the first time I talked to you. Yep. Audacity, record on some combination of Skype, Zoom, Clean Feed, Zencaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Audacity hasn't failed me yet. The Yeti mic and the Audacity. Yeah.
Magic combination.
One thing I haven't quite worked out, because I alternate here. Sometimes I have the opening music into the trailer, into the conversation, and sometimes it's the trailer into the opening music, into the conversation. And I seem to just do it depending on how I feel in the moment. But I love, when I'm editing, I love using fades in and fades out. So sometimes it's nice. I have the opening music, and then if the trailer starts with something explosive, or some noise, you have the music just coming out as that comes in. So I make use of fades, which I've always liked. But yeah, I don't know what I've got for editing. Seems to work fine. I was sort of thinking about kicking it up a notch, sort of technologically, but I don't know. Seems all right.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
Why fix it?
Mm.
So you've touched on a little bit there, the sound, as I've got this next section, it says sound, music and samples. So the music and the sounds that you get, and so how do you work those in, and where did they come from?
There's not so many in Film Gold. Obviously, Glass Onion, I use a ton of clips. I just rip the audio of the trailer generally, and then there's occasionally, like when we did Monty Python and the Holy Grail, I just couldn't resist putting clips. They just come from YouTube, or they come from I have an archive that I had years ago. That's more for music clips, but yeah, just the usual places really. I don't load it with samples. Like with Taxi Driver, which will be out. I'm editing it now, so that'll be out. I put the trailer at the beginning, and then I couldn't resist putting that rom-com trailer in. Yeah, there's
Right.
on YouTube. There's a funny. This Taxi Driver is a rom-com. It's like Travis is single in the city looking for love, and they work it with the sort of wacky music that they would use for a rom-com. So I put that in at the end after the music, so it's sort of top and tailing it a little bit. So it's quite funny. Yeah, I don't really use samples as much because they take hours. I mean, when I was doing the last Glass Onion, just to put the samples, to edit them and put them in, was about 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, where did that time go? So there's not so many in Film Gold. It's a bit more straight. Yeah.
So then, what would you say are your 5 must-see films?
Yes, I did prepare this. This is not what I think are the 5 best films. This is just a little bit of a cross section. So the one that's number 1 on my flick chart is Raging Bull.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't call this a must-see for everyone, because if you have any interest in boxing, I think it's a must-see, because it's what you might call hyper-realism. So where Rocky was the first film was all right, but where Rocky became very unrealistic,
Yeah.
you just get pounded 300 times in the head and not going down. Raging Bull, they went for realism, but there's some very kind of visceral, you see sort of a close-up of someone being slammed.
Yeah.
I'm not selling it very well. Slammed in the nose, and then all this, not either blood or sweat or whatever, pours off them. It's very, very visceral. So it's probably not a must-see for everyone, but it's my number 1 because I think stylistically it's just, really astonishing. The second one, this is a Robert Shaw recommendation. Well known, but not massively well known. The Taking of Pelham 123 from 1974.
Yeah.
Which found its way to number 4. Hang on a sec. It's either number 3 or number 4. Number 3 on my flick chart are 1,500 films. It's a bit of a... I love heist films and I love Robert Shaw, so I knew I'd like that. But it's a very clever film, and it has a really good resolution of how the final guy gets caught. For Hitchcock, so many, but I'd probably say Rear Window.
Yeah.
Which we have reviewed with Matt from Pop Goes the 60s. I know you know that channel.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the limited setting films. So when they're all in one place, and I love Rear Window. I think it's great. And it's a sort of slow build, slow reveal. It's a kind of a whodunit.
Well, that Rear Window, I mean, it's incredible because of the fact that they basically created an entire street in the sound stages where they filmed it. So the set for that is incredible for a film from that period.
It's a courtyard, isn't it? It's a whole huge set, yeah. And James Stewart also had to react to things that were happening, but he couldn't actually see them. So he had to look and then react. But yeah, it's a great film, yeah. Right. I was thinking of Apocalypse Now, because again, that's something like 4 on my flick chart. I thought just for something different, just to show you what it can be like making a film like that, the documentary Hearts of Darkness, A Filmmaker's Apocalypse.
Yeah.
because Francis Ford Coppola's wife was making notes and maybe making an audio diary of some kind when they were making it. And it took 2 to 3 years. Martin Sheen had a heart attack.
Wow.
He played the main character. They had all the trouble with Brando. They'd sit around for days discussing the script because Brando knew that he was getting sort of paid per day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just because you'll get to know a lot of the film as well if you haven't seen it through watching that documentary. And then finally, sort of the granddaddy, but Citizen Kane. But I would highly recommend watching some sort of audio commentary, listening to some sort of audio commentary or making of. Again, there's a good one that was hosted by or narrated by Barry Norman.
Yeah.
So I definitely think Citizen Kane, you really, after you've seen it, you need a bit of help with it to see how great it is, really. Because it's hard to think of it, this is the greatest film ever. If you just think this is the greatest film ever and then just watch it from a 2022 perspective, you're probably not going to understand why. And I'm not saying it's the greatest ever, but you really need to know what hadn't gone before to appreciate it. So that's 5 out of a possible 500 I could have chosen.
For anybody interested, Barry Norman, he used to do a film review show. So it was called Film, and then whatever year it was, so Film 82 or whatever. I think I still call it Film 89 or something, I think, even all these years later.
Yeah.
And his father was the British filmmaker Leslie Norman.
Oh, I didn't know that. As in director?
Yes, yeah. Director and producer, yeah.
Right. Did he make any famous ones?
Oh, you're catching me out now. I don't know. So while I look up that...
Okay.
Actually, I think this is a bit more of an in-depth subject. The state of cinema. What do you think of that comment that's been going around about, the Marvel comment that was put out of it being, like popcorn film, or did they call it like a like a thrill ride almost, or something like some? I can't remember how they worded it now, but as somebody who likes these sort of films, some of them, I will say that I think the problem is, and I don't think that the lockdown has helped matters in a way, because then they've had this backlog of films that they weren't able to put out. And then the film studios, when suddenly we came out of lockdown across the world, they had all these films, and it's like they basically, it's understandable if you're looking at this as a business, but they picked the films where they thought these are the ones that will make the money. These are the ones that probably won't make so much money. So the ones that they're thinking wouldn't make so much money, they threw straight onto streaming services, and then they put the big hitters out in the cinema, which I think is not fair in a way, because you need all the different types of film out there. Essentially, you need popcorn films. You need I said to someone that the Marvel films are almost like the Star Wars of their time, in a sense. But you need a mix of film in the cinema, so you might, if they kept going that way, there's a potential that they'll lose a specific audience who go for the more visceral film, as opposed to a film that's popcorn, explosions, and tells you everything, essentially, without having to think about them.
Yeah, well, they've obviously got to make money, and like you said, it's a smart move to put the ones you're pretty sure are going to be money makers in the cinema, and then play a bit safe, put the other ones on streaming services. What was the other thing we were talking about? Yeah. I think the proportion of, I think the popularity of popcorn films versus art house films, the proportion probably hasn't changed. But it's very hard to know now, isn't it? Yeah. Because if someone, I know they've done stats for streaming services, but there seems to be at the same time an appetite for popcorn films, but possibly a growing appetite for more thoughtful things. Unfortunately, my trajectory with films, about 2010, I stopped watching current stuff, and I keep half an eye on it, as I said earlier, but it's hard for me to say. I haven't seen any of the Marvel films.
Right.
I'm not sure if I've ever been interested in sort of any superhero. I suppose Superman when I was a kid. It's hard for me to say. I think one trend which is absolutely certain, and it reflects our culture, is sort of low attention span.
Yeah.
So it's almost a presumption that we have low attention spans. So everything has got to be sort of... And trailers actually all seem to literally have that sort of sound.
Yeah.
That kind of explosion sound. But I think it's just gradually that's happening where everything is lower and lower attention span. And I do find it difficult. I find a lot of foreign films are the ones I watch, are the more recent ones. Like Gaspar Noé is just, I think it's just astonishing filmmaker. There's a film called Irreversible that definitely I wouldn't recommend to people. Have you seen that?
No, I've not seen it. I've heard of it, but I've not seen it.
Oh my God, it's really rough. But you know, if you're into seeing the dark side of life, I think he's amazing. But I think this is a total generalization. But a lot of European films tend to be just shot in a slightly different way, you know. And I just gravitate towards those, and I find myself now going on to different websites and seeking out older stuff, old obscurities from the past. So I'm probably not the best person to. I could probably give you some sort of curmudgeonly thing about how film isn't what it used to be. But I think that low attention span thing, and the thing of they're so expensive now that they are liable to play safe. Because there are certain ones that you'll know, Heaven's Gate and Ishtar in the 80s, that almost bankrupted in Apocalypse Now. So I don't think they ever want to take the risk of almost bankrupting the company with one film. You know?
Yeah.
So I think less risks and low attention span. Yeah.
A film of Leslie Norman's that jumps out to me would be The Cruel Sea, by the way. That's one of his films, which is a fantastic war film. He directed that, and he co-wrote the script as well.
Oh, wow, brilliant.
A lot of the great
so he was a name.
Second World War films that you see on the television are actually directed by Leslie Norman.
Oh, right. So that's how Barry...
Hell of a long career as well.
I wonder if Barry Norman grew up critiquing his father's films. Must be not.
Maybe. I seem to remember...
Yeah, he says, you know...
I seem to remember... I've read... I think I've read a biography of Barry Norman's, and there's stories there of him actually being on set when his father was actually doing the films, and he'd be behind there just watching and taking in what his dad was doing. So, in a way, I think that probably helped Barry then as a critic to understand the machinations of what goes on behind the scenes with filmmaking, so that he could look at the film from that angle and know where the filmmaker's possibly coming from.
Yeah, maybe be a bit more sympathetic. I don't know. Yeah. But do you think critics... How many films a year do you think a critic would watch? Are they watching something every day, do you think?
I suppose they must do. Somebody like Ebert must have been watching films constantly.
Because if that's your sole job, I suppose. Yeah. No, but I think Barry Norman was... he just had the voice and the delivery and everything, didn't he? And, of course, that amazing theme tune as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I didn't realise for years was... what is it? I Wish I Knew What It Means to Be Free.
That's
by Nina Simone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she did one version. But we only ever heard that brilliant bit of piano at the beginning.
Yeah.
Mm. So the film program was a big thing. No, films have been with me, my whole life, really. Unlike music, when I was a kid, I would watch more adult, not that kind of adult, films for adults. And if I could just tell a quick story, I had a friend called Edmund, who's been on Glass Onion, actually, one of the bonus episodes.
Yep.
His mother had an amazing collection. In those days, it was VHS. Some she'd bought, and some were blank VHS tapes that she'd filled up with old films. And I just, got to know them. So I've always had that association. I find some black and white films a bit laughable at times. And when we do reviews, we do make fun of them a little bit. There's a podcast I was on called Classic Film Jerks.
Yep.
Yeah, and we did Hard Day's Night, and I kind of found myself making fun of it a bit, but still liking it. Well, just because that was the nature of the podcast, really. They had this thing called So Old. They had this section called So Old, and they talk about how in old films, it's like people could just walk into government buildings or things that you never see anymore, like lemonade stands or whatever it is, just stuff like that. But then certain old films I'm just massively drawn to. Hitchcock being an obvious one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We watched Rope the other day, which is one of my favourite Hitchcock films.
Yeah, we've done a review of that. Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah, again, limited setting.
Yep.
All in one apartment, more or less in real time.
And mistakenly called a one-shot film because it actually isn't a one-shot. It's one shot up until a certain bit where where the camera goes and it goes. Is it to James Stewart's back or something? The camera goes to James Stewart's back, and then it's a very quick edit. So it'll go there, and then it'll come back around, back to the scene or whatever. And what's happened there is it's used that almost like a blackout that you'd see in some films. So essentially, it's one shot up until there, and then they had to change the film of the camera because film in a camera only has so much time in it. And then they started shooting again, and it pulls and it sort of like carries on across and back into the scene there. So it's actually a two-shot film, not a one-shot, because the tape wasn't long enough to be able to do it all in one shot.
Yeah, reels only held about 10 minutes of film in those days, yeah. Yeah, it's very clever because they're all wearing dark suits, aren't they?
Yeah.
So it's various characters, I think. So the camera comes behind them, as you said, just for a second the screen is black. So they were able to change the reel. But then they made that kind of into the film.
Yeah.
They did a very clever thing at the end where they actually open the chest and there's a body in it.
Yep.
They actually made that the bit where they changed the reel. So you open the chest and the screen goes black. So I like the way they combine those two things together. But yeah, that's a big one for me as well. That was a film I saw very early.
To me, that film, when I watch it, I'm watching it and I'm thinking, essentially, it's Hitchcock filming a play because it is in one place, and so you've only got it from the one position as well. You don't get different camera angles or this camera from there, that camera from there. It's all single in that camera there, and that's. So it's almost like he'd already prepared knowing that he was going to do this. And it's really smart how he's done it because he knows that he's worked out when the tape is going to run out. So he knows to tell the camera to sort of like go across there to the back. And that's where the tape runs out. Stop, change the reel, carry on. And so it's really smart how he's actually worked that into the whole aesthetic of the film.
Yeah, and it was a nightmare to make as well because there are actually some production photos where they show you the floor, and the floor is just full of like actors' marks, but also wires. So they had to worry about tripping over wires as well. It's incredible. If you ever watch the film, try and imagine if the camera panned down to the floor, which obviously it wouldn't, but imagine if they did that, and you'd actually see what it took to make that. Yeah, that's sort of a magical film for me. I think It's not perfect, but it's I think they suffered for their art though. Must be very rough. Imagine if you made a mistake after 9 minutes, 50 seconds.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, they'd have to do the whole of the previous 9 minutes or whatever again. Yeah.
Yeah, but they had a lot of marks. It's very, very difficult for them to make, but worth it.
Okay. Did it take a long time to make that film then?
I don't know if it was a long time. I think it was just the conditions of it. I'm sure they made mistakes, but obviously you're saving time by doing 10-minute takes on the one hand.
Yeah.
I've never known how many takes they took for each of the 10 minutes. I've never looked at that. So I suppose on the one where they save time, and then it's tricky. Yeah. Don't think it took us particularly long time though.
But then with that, you've also got the plus point, or Hitchcock did, where he's using people that he's used to. So you've got, you've got James Stewart, who's good, reliable, and he knew he'd already worked with Stewart before then. And you've also got Farley Granger, who had already used in like Strangers on a Train and films like that. So in a sense, it's like he'd picked these people knowing their abilities before going into the film and making the film. So he sort of knew that they'd be on their marks and they'd be hot and know what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's true with the crew as well. I think in a way it's actually the crew that they want to work with most regularly. Sorry, like I think Woody Allen has had almost the same crew for a huge part of his career. Yeah, it must help when you've got reliable. Yeah, James Stewart, Cary Grant. You know they're going to do a job for you, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to people this time, then, starting the podcast?
Probably the same. I don't know. I think I probably spend a long time editing them, and maybe I make them a bit too. I take out all the ers and ums, and it does take a long, long time. So I don't know. When I listen to other shows, I actually don't notice that there's ers and ums after a while. So perhaps my advice would be not to take as long editing as I do.
Yeah.
Unless you are, I don't know. Don't know if it's perfectionism or it's just such a nice feeling when you hear it back. I would say if it's a film podcast, I would say keep it to a manageable length, perhaps, because there are ones out there that are 3 hours or however long. If you love the film, that obviously works for you. But
yeah,
I think the original advice I gave when we did the Glass Onion show was make it smooth, but not too smooth. Don't make it too slick. But now, of course, podcasting is changing because it's becoming a money-making enterprise, which I think it should be, depending on the amount of effort you put in.
Yep.
So perhaps it's moving towards the slick, but I don't really want podcasts to become radio shows because then you lose that freedom, and you notice, they're getting more and more censored as well.
Yeah.
And to have a clean podcast, you can't have any swearing and stuff. But if it's not a money-making thing, obviously have fun, have fun with it. And with films, I would go for films you love, really, because then that will carry the show almost. Don't make too many notes; just have a few prompts. That's how it works for me. Yeah. So,
so where can people find you and get hold of the show?
Right. Well, it seems like Twitter is a good place, and I'm just looking. Yeah, at FilmGold75, capital F, capital G. I have a website, Antony without an H, Rotunno, ROTUNNO.com. So it's got everything, my music, my blog, my podcasts. But yeah, basically everywhere, really. Film Gold. I have a YouTube channel called Contrafib, which you'll know is a Blackadder reference.
Yeah.
Contrafibularities. CONTRAFIB. And that's got a mixture of music and film. So I put probably about 2/3 of the Film Gold episodes on that channel. But obviously they're everywhere. I do it through Anchor. So yeah, Film Gold, pretty much everywhere you find podcasts.
And you can find Pods Like Us on any streaming platform, and we are on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. But anyway, thank you for speaking with me today, Anthony.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, mate. And thank you all for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.
Bye-bye.
What's that?
Do I look at you or the camera? That's what I always worry about. 'Cause it seems weird to have a conversation and look at the camera and not look at the person who's talking to you as well.
That's true. That is true. That's, yeah.
I'll look at you, I think. Yeah. Seems more natural.
Yeah, because otherwise it's almost like breaking a fourth wall.
Yeah.
Hello, listeners.
All right. Well, we haven't
So-
officially started yet, have we?
No. Okay.
Okay.